There are treasures men chase because they are rich. And then there were treasures men chase because they are stupid. The lost ale was both. Pickle Piper first heard the tale when he was 6 years old, sitting under a broken tavern table while old sailors argued above him. They whispered about a golden drink hidden beyond the middle depths, past the goblin toll roads, past the dwarf mines, past the rainforest river where the Hugos ruled the water. Pickle never believed a word of it until the map arrived. It came inside a wet boot, nailed to the mast of the Flying Dutchman during a storm. Reek, the destroyer, pulled it out, sniffed it once, and said it smelled important. The map showed one sentence in red ink: "Find the lost ale, and the sea will kneel." Pickle smiled. Reek cracked his knuckles, and the Flying Dutchman turned toward the middle depths. By sunrise, they reached a black cave under the cliffs. Inside, goblins waited with rusted forks, tiny helmets, and the confidence of creatures who had never met Reek. The Goblin King demanded payment. Pickle offered him 1 pickle. The Goblin King called it an insult, so Pickle threw the pickle so hard it knocked the crown clean off his head. That was when the goblins attacked. For 12 minutes, the cave became pure foolishness, goblins flying into barrels, Reek swinging 2 of them like wet laundry, Pickle shouting pirate poems nobody asked for. When the dust settled, the goblins opened the gate and pretended it had been their idea. Beyond the gate were the dwarf mines. The dwarfs were worse. They were short, angry, and professionally suspicious. Their captain, Brickbeard O'Mallet, blocked the path with a hammer bigger than William Von Chome's entire personality. He said no pirate would cross his mine without answering the ancient riddle. Pickle said, "Ask it then." Brickbeard leaned close and whispered, "What has 2 hands, no brain, and still thinks he is captain?" Everyone looked at Reek. Reek looked back, then pointed at the dwarf and said, "You." Nobody knew if that was the correct answer, but the dwarves laughed so hard the ceiling shook. Brickbeard let them pass, mostly because Reek had accidentally bent his hammer into a horseshoe. At last the tunnel opened into a rainforest. Warm rain fell through giant leaves. The map led them to a river, black and fast, with bubbles rising where no bubbles should rise. Pickle stepped to the bank. Reek stepped beside him. The whole river grunted. Then the Hugos came. 5'7", dense as anchor stones, webbed fingers, webbed toes, fish faces full of ego. They launched out of the river at once, roaring like they owned the world, then all landed directly on each other. For a moment, nobody moved. One Hugo grunted. Another Hugo grunted louder. Then the whole pile got angry and rolled back into the river. In the water, the Hugos were monsters. They moved like knives through rain. One grabbed Pickle's boot, another slammed into Reek like a wet cannonball. But Pickle remembered the old tavern story. Hugos were powerful in water, slow on land, and after 20 minutes, their gills began to dry. So Pickle did the only thing a 7'3" pirate could do. He started insulting them. He called them soggy lake goblins. He called them trout with shoulders. He called their leader Lord Grunt of the Mud Puddle. The Hugos could not allow that. Their egos were too big. One by one, they dragged themselves onto the bank to fight, and one by one, they got slower. Reek waited. Pickle kept talking. At minute 19, the Hugo leader raised a webbed finger and tried to say something terrifying. All that came out was a dry little grunt. Reek picked him up by the ankle and tossed him back into the river like a bag of wet flour. The path was clear. Past the river stood a stone door covered in apple carvings. Pickle's hands began to shake. The lost ale was real. Every story from his childhood, every drunken whisper, every warning from sailors with no eyebrows, all of it had led here. Reek pushed the door open. Golden light poured across their faces. Inside, on a stone pedestal, sat the treasure that could make the sea kneel. Not a crown, not a sword, not Andy Scrillers' green elixir, just one cold can, red, silver, apple-flavored. Bushlight apple, the legendary Bapple. Pickle stared at it. Reek stared at Pickle. Neither of them understood what they were looking at. But far away, across the black water, Captain Blacktokes felt the wind change, and Lord Andy Scrillers opened one eye. Because the lost ale had been found, and the seven seas were about to get very stupid.